Hey everyone, it's January 11th in New Jersey and it's 43 degrees today, no wind, so it's a good day for me to winterize my boat. I've been putting it off because I've been waiting on getting some of the parts. Now that I have everything I need, I'm going to get it done today. I mean, unfortunately, it is a sad day whenever you have to put your boat away. I'm that way. I like to keep it out. I could run this boat all year. It's no problem. It's an outboard, it drains, so it's not going to freeze. But this time of year, I winterize it, and if I go fishing, I go out on the kayak or I go by land, and I give this boat a break until early March when I start going back out for stripers and white perch. So today I'm going to show you the steps I take. I am not a mechanic, but I am mechanically inclined enough to be able to do this. I've been doing all the maintenance on my boat myself since I've had it. Winterizing is a very easy task, okay? So I'm going to show you the steps today. Here are the parts you'll need. Okay, here's the parts you'll need. I use all Yamaha products whenever I can. You can use aftermarket, but I just use the Yamaha. It's not that much more expensive, and it's what they recommend, so that's what I would go with. For the lower unit, you will need two of these lower unit gaskets. They're for the drain plug and the fill plug. Okay, two of them. You need a quart of lower unit oil. I have two here because I have a little bit left in the other one. I'm going to make sure I use that, but you just need one, okay? You need the oil change kit. So if you buy the whole kit, it comes with the 5 quarts of oil. It also comes with the oil filter, and it also comes with the crush washer for the drain plug. I don't use the drain plug. I extract the oil out with a pump, but it does give that in there as well. There are 2 filters for this engine as far as for the fuel. This is your primary fuel filter. It's in the front of the engine. That's going to be a very easy part to get to. This one here is your water separating filter that helps with the ethanol problems. That's going to be off. It's not going to be on the engine. It's going to be in the back of the boat somewhere. You might have to get under a hatch to get to that. But again, it's definitely something you want to change now because if there's any water in there, it will freeze. Okay, here are the tools you'll need to do this task for winterizing. You'll need some type of pan for collecting the lower unit, or if you do your oil through the drain plug, you'll also need that as well. I use a oil pump extractor, and I do it through the dipstick. After I get the engine nice and hot, I suck it through there. This way I don't have to risk cross-threading that aluminum pan or having any issues there. If there's an issue there, the engine has to come apart to get to it to fix it, unless you can put some type of thread in that pan. Okay, so I just do it this way. It just seems to work well for me. All right, you'll need various pliers and cutters, flathead screwdriver. This is the spanner wrench. I bought this online. That's used to get that primary fuel filter off. Some people use channel locks on there. I didn't want to tear up the plastic, so I just bought the tool. You'll need a torque wrench. I like to torque everything to spec. Various oil filter wrenches. This one happens to be for the oil filter. This one does the water separating filter. I also have one here for the oil filter to torque it back down to spec. You'll need a socket, some adapters, some extensions. This is, I believe, a 1 1/4 for the prop nut. I use this one here for torquing down the lower unit. They have to be at like 6 foot-pounds, or it's hardly anything, so I put them on there. Again, you could do them hand tight. I just prefer to do them to specs. I have another adapter here. You need some wire ties, okay? Grease gun. I use the Yamaha grease for doing all the grease fittings. And then you'll need some type of rust and corrosion protection. I use this BioShield T9 for spraying down the engine once you're all done. The internals, you can spray the plastic down, you can spray the metal down with this connectors. It doesn't do any damage to anything, and it helps with any of the salt that may get in there. All right, the first step is going to be to remove the cowling to get access to the engine. And you need a water supply, you need a hose, all right? You need something to run the water through your engine. This is a set of simple ears that will just hook up to here. I take one extra step, and I use a product that helps remove salt deposits from the engine. It's called Salt Away. It works very well. You buy it in a little container like this, and it even comes with an adapter. So what I do is I take this is the blue Salt Away in here, removes the deposits. I hook it up to the ears. It has a little on-off switch at the top. When you put it on soap, it's going to run it through. When you switch it to rinse, it'll just run water through. Hook the other end of your water and hook it up to your lower unit and run it through before you start. Okay, the next thing I'll do before I start the engine is I will take the fuel out of this reservoir here. That is what holds your primary fuel filter. And in order to do that, there is a blue clip. You can see it down here in the bottom where I'm kind of pointing to. It comes right there. It comes off the bottom with a wire that goes underneath here. It's a sensor for it. You have to use a wrench to get this off. So I have a simple spanner wrench that's designed to go up in there, all right? And what I'll do is I'll take off this line here. That's your fuel going in. And I will hook up a reserve tank, all right, to that line with this hose here, a primer bulb, and that will pump in fuel mixed with oil and stabilizer to help stabilize this engine. You can do this a couple ways. You can either take the spark plugs out and spray into the spark plugs and turn the engine over, or with these electric fuel ignition engines, these EFI Yamahas, you can suck it in this way and it will suck that fluid in through everything and make sure it's all coated for the year. That's just the way I've always done it. It seems to work well for me. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to remove this to get this fuel out of here, and I'm just going to take that fuel and dump it back into my tank because that fuel's good. There's nothing wrong with it. And I'm going to start pumping in the new fuel so we don't have to wait so long for it to start circulating the winterized fuel into the tank. Okay, now that I have everything hooked up, you can see the hoses going into the container with salt away, going into the ears on the lower unit. I'm just going to turn the water on and then we'll start the boat up and let this circulate through for a little while. All right, hopefully you can hear me. Right now what I'm doing is I'm just warming up the engine. You can see that water's coming out up here. It's telling you that the water's coming up from the water pump. I'm going to definitely do my water pump in the spring. It's been about 3 years. It's due. All we're doing is waiting for the engine to warm up and start throwing out some white smoke from the oil mixture in that reserve tank. And then once that happens, we'll be able to change the primary fuel filter and start sucking out the oil with this oil pump. All right, so the next step after warming up the engine is to extract the oil. Like I said, you can either take the oil out of the drain plug, which is up in here, or you can go through the dipstick with an extractor pump, which is what I do. It doesn't take long. You just prime the pump it about 20-30 times, and it sucks all the oil right out of the dipstick. Okay, next step is to put in a new fuel filter. This is the primary fuel filter from Yamaha. Here's the old one that came out. You can see the difference, okay? So all this does is it goes into this container here. This wire is what plugs in for the sensor. It goes back on here on the bottom. This is the section where I took off the primary fuel line. So once I put this on, I'll reattach the fuel line, put a zip tie on, and that'll be good to go until the spring. All right, next step is to remove the oil filter. Yamaha puts these oil filters upside down, and what I do is I shove some paper towels in here to catch any of the excess so it doesn't go all the way down underneath the engine. And all you need is a simple oil filter wrench, and you can remove this and take it off and put the next one back on. Okay, remove the oil filter. Here's the new one going in. What I like to do is take a little bit of oil, just put it around the ring there, just so it seats nice. Put it on the rubber seal. Spin it on by hand. All right. Specs for this is to tighten it down to 13.3 foot-pounds. I'm sure some people just hand tighten them. You just don't want to tighten them too much. So I have this wrench right here. I'll put it on there and tighten it down. 13.3. There it is right there. Goes on easy. Yamaha also gives you a sticker to put on there and write down the date and the hours so that you don't forget. Okay, I'm going to put in 5 quarts of oil in the top. We just put our filter back in. I use the Yamalube. I use the Yamaha products. This is a 10W30 4M made for these engines. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to drain the lower unit oil. So you have a drain plug right here, and you have a fill plug right here. All right, so if you take the drain plug out first, it's going to slowly come out, and then when you take the fill plug out, it'll really start to come down. I suggest you wear gloves doing this. This is gear oil. It definitely has a funky smell to it. You're not going to want to get it on your skin. Okay, remove both the drain plug and the fill plug. You can see it's coming out like it should. It's not milky. If it's milky, then it has water in there, and that's what you're really checking for. The reason why you would get water in there is if you had a seal that failed. A lot of times they'll fail from fishing line getting tangled around your prop, especially braid, and it'll actually score that seal, and then that'll let water through. We're going to check the prop in a little while to make sure, but this is coming out nice and clean. It looks good. As far as the two plugs, the drain plugs, the longer one here has a metallic pieces on it because it's magnetic. The top one is your fill. You got to make sure you don't switch these when you put them back on, okay? And you definitely want to replace the washers every time. It's not worth it for a couple dollars to reuse these. I just replace them every time. Okay, while we're waiting for the lower unit to finish draining, we're going to remove this prop. Mine has a lock on the back, so that's why it looks a little different. The way it works is, you have to have a special tool to get it out, which I have right here. Most people have just a regular nut with a cotter pin through it. So you would just remove the nut, the cotter pin first, take the nut off, and then take this off. And in order to take it off, it's a lot easier if you take a piece of wood and put a piece of wood up in here. Let me adjust my camera so you can see it. Put a piece of wood up in here, and that'll hold the prop while you turn it to loosen it up. There we go. Comes right off. Okay, with the prop removed, this is the main part that goes on first, where you might find some fishing line, and believe it or not, I did have a little bit in there. Okay, this is what you're going to want to grease up. So I have my grease gun here. I'm just going to throw some grease on here, reassemble everything, tighten it down to specs, and that'll be ready for the spring. All right, everything's reassembled. As far as the prop, the nut on the back here gets tightened down to 40.6 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to use my torque wrench and tighten that down to specs. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the lower unit gear case lube in. What you will use is a little hand pump, and what you do is you attach it to the drain hole and you pump it up by hand, and when it starts to come out the fill hole, you know that you are filled, and then you put the fill hole screw back in, and you torque that down to 6.6 foot-pounds. When you put that in, and once you take the tube out, you'll have enough time to where it's not going to lose much. Couple little drops. You put the drain plug back in, torque that down to 6.6 foot-pounds, and you are done. So you're just going to fill this up until it starts to come out the top hole. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to replace the water separating filter. So every boat's a little different. For my boat, I have to open this hatch, and if you see where these two little screw holes are, that's the bracket for the water separating filter. So I have to stick my hand underneath there, and I loosen it up with a filter wrench. Real simple. I already loosened it up. It's ready to come out. It doesn't really spill much, but I do put gloves on just to try not to get any fuel spill. I'm not going to reuse that fuel because that could have water in it. I'll put that in the bucket and then just wind this one back on hand tight. What we're going to do is we're going to hit all the grease fittings on the engine. There are quite a few. There's one under here. There is some on the front here, right where the steering linkage is. Again, it just pops right on. I use the Yamaha grease. When you come around the other side here, you have another one over here. If you look online, you will see where you need to put them for each engine. For this engine, they're very easy to find. I hit them all at the end of the season, so I know that they're covered. The last thing I do is I end up spraying some of this T9 BioShield rust and corrosion protection. You can spray this all over the engine. You can spray it on the plastic, anywhere you want. If you put it on like that, or you can spray it on like this, and you can wipe it down. You can spray it all underneath. All it's going to do is protect anything from saltwater corrosion.